Hello, my name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 39 years old, born and raised in Kentucky, and for most of my life, I was told that silence was safer than truth. I was raised on a red clay road where the air smelled of truck oil and pine, and where the people in my life believed in tough love and tighter lips. My daddy worked construction, hard hands, harder voice. My mom taught Sunday school, made banana pudding from scratch, and turned her face away every time something cracked that wasn't a joke. My younger brother Caleb was the family's crown jewel. Blonde hair, dimples, good grades, charming in a way that made people overlook the shadows in his smile. From the time we were kids, my parents decided he was going places. I, on the other hand, was just there, the older sister, the good girl, the quiet one. The one who didn't need much, the one who could be counted on to understand. I learned to stay in the background, to swallow pain with a polite nod. I thought that was love. I thought that's what good daughters did. But what they called love, I now know was something else entirely. It was fear, dressed in Sunday best. It was being taught that keeping the family name clean was more important than keeping your bones whole. And the first time I truly realized that, my daughter was on the floor, cradling her arm, screaming, "But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back. Because no storm begins with thunder. It starts with a sky too quiet." I had my daughter Emma when I was 29. Her father left when I was 3 months pregnant. Said he wasn't ready to be tied down to diapers and dishes. So I raised her on my own, working double shifts at the school library and cleaning houses on weekends. I didn't complain. I had Emma, and to me, she was everything. She has my hazel eyes, but Caleb's smile. I used to pray she wouldn't inherit anything else from that side of the family. But life has a cruel sense of humor sometimes. We lived a quiet life in a 2-bedroom rental on the edge of town. Every morning I'd pack her lunch with little notes that said things like, "You're braver than you feel," or "Your kindness is your superpower." She'd roll her eyes, but I knew she kept them. Sometimes I'd find them stuffed in her pencil case, crumpled but safe. Emma was 10, the day everything started to crack. It was December, Christmas approaching, lights going up in windows, cinnamon in the air. Caleb had just come back to town after working out of state for 3 years. Everyone talked about how successful he was. "Climb the ladder real quick," my mom said, beaming with pride. "Such a man now." They barely noticed how his hugs felt like traps, how his eyes flickered with something cold when no one was looking. My parents invited us all to the house for Christmas week. Me, Emma, Caleb, and his teenage son, Tyler. I didn't want to go. I hadn't spoken to Caleb much since he left. But my mom begged. "It's family, Claire. It's tradition. Don't let your bitterness ruin the season." Bitterness. That's what they called it when I didn't pretend everything was perfect. So I said yes. God help me. I said yes. The moment we stepped into my parents' house, I knew something was wrong. The wallpaper still peeled in the corners. The smell of mothballs and old wood still clung to every room. But it wasn't the house. It was Caleb. He was louder, sharper. His laugh had teeth now. Emma clung to me the first night, whispering, "Mom, why does Uncle Caleb look at me like that?" I should have listened to that whisper. Instead, I said, "He's just tired, baby." It's been a long trip, because that's what I was taught, to explain away unease, to put a pretty bow on broken glass. On Christmas Eve, my parents went all out. Turkey, stuffing, candles, carols. Caleb was in charge of watching the kids while I helped my mom in the kitchen. Tyler and Emma were playing Uno in the den. At least, that's what I thought. I didn't hear the slap. I heard the scream. I dropped the carving knife and ran. Emma was on the floor, her face white as paper, cradling her left arm. Her body shook like a leaf in a storm. Caleb stood above her, eyes wild. "She tripped," he said, almost before I could speak. ran into the table. "Damn kids don't watch where they're going." Emma was gasping for breath, sobbing. He pushed me, Mom." I scooped her into my arms, heart thudding so loud I couldn't hear anything else. Her arm hung limp and twisted. When I turned to my parents, expecting outrage, horror, something, they both stood silent. Then my mother said the words that broke whatever faith I had left in her. "Claire, don't overreact." Overreact? My daughter's arm was swelling before our eyes. She couldn't even move her fingers. My father added, "You know Emma's dramatic. Probably just a sprain. Kids bounce back." Caleb didn't say a word. He just smirked, as if he knew they'd protect him. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I wrapped my coat around Emma, told them I was taking her to the hospital, and walked out. But inside, something finally snapped. Because that wasn't the first time Caleb had hurt someone. Not the first time my parents swept it under the rug. Not the first time they chose him over what was right. But it would damn well be the last. The X-ray showed a clean break, right at the radius. The doctor asked gently, "How did this happen?" Emma hesitated, looked at me. I looked back, steady, and for the first time in my life, I said the truth. My brother pushed her. The doctor raised his eyebrows, wrote it down, and just like that, the silence began to crack. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid of Caleb, but because I was afraid of what would come next. Of how much ugliness I'd have to pull into the light, of what it would cost me to finally stop protecting the ones who didn't deserve it. But as I watched Emma sleep with her cast propped up on a pillow, I knew. If I didn't stand now, then when? I wasn't the scared girl hiding behind shut doors anymore. I was a mother, and I was done playing quiet. If you've ever been told to calm down, if they ever said you're exaggerating, if your truth was treated like an inconvenience, then you know how this feels. Leave a comment if you've ever had to choose between peace and justice. Share this if your silence once protected the wrong person. And keep watching. Because what happened after the X-ray? They weren't ready for that. I didn't go back to my parents' house after the hospital visit. I didn't return their calls. I didn't respond to the messages my mother left on my voicemail, her voice increasingly trembling, increasingly desperate. Not because she missed me, but because someone had told. And now, the little incident wasn't just a family secret anymore. It had a medical report attached. It had witnesses. It had a fracture line the length of a betrayal. I watched Emma sleep on the couch beside me, her cast heavy and awkward. Her long brown hair was tangled from tossing and turning, her cheeks flushed with restless sleep. I hadn't left her side in 2 days. The doctor said she'd heal. But what about what wasn't visible? What about the moment when trust fractures? What about the way her eyes looked at me, not with fear, but with the soft confusion of someone who expected to be protected and didn't understand why that protection came too late? That was the part that kept me up. That look. The morning after the hospital, I woke up to a text from my father. "You've made things worse than they ever needed to be." That was it. No, "How's Emma?" No, "We're sorry." Just blame. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. For the first time in my life, their disappointment didn't feel like a weight I had to carry. It felt like a rope slipping out of my hands, and I let it go. But the quiet that followed wasn't peace. It was the beginning of something harder. Caleb hadn't reached out, not once, not even to lie, not even to twist the truth like he always had when we were kids. I half expected him to show up on my porch, slick as oil, with that same rehearsed grin he'd used on teachers and girlfriends and probation officers. But he didn't. And somehow that was worse, because it told me he didn't feel the need to defend himself. He thought the family would handle it. He thought my mother would smooth it over, that my father would silence me with guilt, that Claire wouldn't go that far. But what none of them knew was this: I already had. The social worker, Mary Ann, showed up at my door 3 days after the report. Her eyes were kind, but wary, the way people look when they know they're walking into something deeper than a broken arm. She asked to speak to Emma alone. I sat on the other side of the wall, chewing the inside of my cheek raw. After 20 minutes, she came out and asked if I could sit down. I braced myself. "I believe you," she said. The air left my lungs all at once. She pulled out her notepad and went on. "Emma's story is consistent. The doctor's report supports it. And Claire, she mentioned something else." My spine stiffened. "What?" "She said she saw Caleb yelling at his son, grabbing his wrist hard, said she'd seen bruises on Tyler's arm before, said he always wore long sleeves." I sat there, heart pounding, because I'd seen it too. I just hadn't named it, and naming it meant no one could pretend anymore. Mary Ann closed her notepad. "We're opening an investigation. You should be prepared. This won't be easy." I nodded. "I'm not doing this because it's easy." She looked at me for a long second, then said something I'll never forget. "Then I think your daughter just broke the cycle for everyone." That night, I tucked Emma in. She looked so small in her bed, her cast propped up on a pillow. "Mom," she whispered, just as I was about to turn off the light, "are we going to be in trouble because I told?" I sat down beside her, took her hand carefully. "No, baby, you're brave. And sometimes brave people make other people uncomfortable. But that doesn't mean you're wrong." She didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, "Uncle Caleb said not to say anything. He said I fall too much." Her eyes were watery now. "But I didn't fall, Mommy." I kissed her forehead. "I know you didn't. And now everyone else will too." What Caleb didn't know was that he hadn't just hurt my daughter. He'd lit a fire under every memory I'd tried to bury. The belt marks he left on Tyler weren't so different from the ones my father left on me. The slap to Emma's arm brought back the time I fell down the stairs at age 9, pushed, but told I was clumsy. They used to say Claire was sensitive, Claire was emotional, Claire was dramatic. But the truth is, I was never the fragile one. I was just the one who wouldn't lie for them. The next day, I got a call from my mother. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. "Claire, please, honey. This is tearing the family apart. Caleb's job is on the line. He's already dealing with so much. Can't we just talk about this like adults?" "Adults? You mean like the kind who let a 10-year-old bleed while protecting a grown man?" I saved the voicemail. Not to listen to again, but in case I ever needed proof of how far they were willing to go to protect the wrong person. The silence in our house became holy. It was the first time Emma and I existed without shame or apology. We played card games. I read to her from her favorite books. She let me paint little flowers on her cast. We laughed. But every night after she slept, I would cry in the kitchen. Not because I was afraid of what was coming, but because I couldn't believe how long I'd accepted this as normal. How many times I'd swallowed screams for the sake of keeping the peace. Well, peace had a price. And this time, I wasn't paying it. The first time I noticed Tyler's sleeves, it was Thanksgiving 2 years ago. He was 12 then, long-legged and quiet, with shaggy blonde hair that always fell into his eyes. Emma adored him, followed him around like a little shadow. I remember asking Caleb that day, "Isn't he warm in that sweatshirt?" Caleb shrugged. "He's going through a phase. Kids do that." But I remember how Tyler flinched when his father tousled his hair, how he jerked just slightly, like he thought the touch would turn rough. Back then, I dismissed it. Or maybe I didn't want to know. I told myself Caleb was a strict dad, that maybe Tyler was sensitive, that maybe it wasn't my place, that maybe it wasn't my business. But now, Now, every second I'd spent convincing myself of that lie felt like a betrayal, not of Tyler, of the girl I once was. After Marianne's visit, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Emma was home recovering, but Tyler? He was still there, in that house, under Caleb's roof, walking on eggshells no one else dared admit were there. I knew how that felt. I had lived in that same quiet terror. I had mastered the art of never crying out loud. And if I was going to fight for Emma, I had to fight for Tyler too. I drove to the middle school that afternoon. I told myself I was just going to ask questions, not cause a scene. But when the secretary asked if I had an appointment, I said, "I'm his aunt. His mom's not around. And I think something bad is happening at home." She didn't argue. Minutes later, Tyler stepped into the office. He looked smaller than I remembered, paler. "Hi, Aunt Claire," he mumbled, avoiding my eyes. "Hey, buddy," I said softly. "You want to grab a juice from the vending machine and chat for a second?" He nodded, slowly. We sat on the bench just outside the building. Kids passed us, laughing, throwing footballs, gossiping. But Tyler sat with his arms crossed, sleeves tugged down, even in the warmth of late afternoon sun. "You doing okay?" I asked. He shrugged. "You heard about Emma, right?" He nodded. Still no eye contact. "Tyler, can I ask you something?" His shoulders tensed. "You ever feel like people don't see what really happens at home?" There was a pause. Then he whispered, "All the time." I felt my throat tighten. He wasn't crying. He wasn't shaking. But the way he said it, flat, simple, like he had accepted it long ago, hit me harder than any outburst could have. I hesitated, then gently said, "Emma told me she saw bruises on your arm." He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. Then he said, "It's not always bad, just when he drinks, or when I don't do what he says fast enough." I didn't realize I was crying until he looked up at me and said, "Please don't tell him I said that." I wiped my face. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you," I said. "But I need your help, okay?" He blinked. "Like what?" "Like, if you ever feel scared or if something happens again, you tell me. And if you can, take a photo or write it down. Or call me. I'll always pick up." He nodded, but then his lips quivered. "But if you tell, he'll say I'm lying. He always says I make stuff up." I exhaled slowly. "Tyler, I used to be you. I know what it feels like when people protect the person hurting you. But I believe you, and I'm going to make sure the right people believe you too." Before I left, I handed him a folded note with my phone number. He tucked it into his pocket like it was a lifeline, and as I drove away, my hands clenched the wheel so tightly I thought it might snap. Because what child should ever have to gather evidence to be believed? What kind of family teaches a kid to document their own pain? Mine. That night, I called Marianne. "I talked to Tyler," I said. She listened as I recounted everything, every word, every pause. Then she said, "Thank you. That might be what we need to open a separate case." Separate case. Like this rot ran so deep it needed 2 files. I stayed up late emailing her what I'd learned, what Emma had seen, even the old photos I found of Caleb from high school, the ones where he had bruises we all ignored too. Because this didn't start with him. It started before him, with my father. With silence passed down like some cursed heirloom, but that didn't mean it had to end with us. The next morning my mother showed up at my door. I hadn't seen her since the night of the accident. She looked tired, older. She stood on the porch, arms crossed, her mouth pursed. "I figured you'd still be mad," she said. I didn't say a word. She shifted her purse on her shoulder. "Look, Claire, you've always been emotional, sensitive. But this is out of hand. You're blowing things up for no reason. Caleb didn't mean to hurt Emma." I felt my hands shaking, but I stayed calm. She has a broken arm. She tripped. She said he shoved her. She's a child, Claire. Kids get confused. You know that. I took a long breath. No, Mom. What I know is that she's more honest than the adults who raised me. My mother's eyes flashed. You're trying to destroy this family. No, I said. You already did that. I'm just refusing to stay quiet about it. Then I closed the door. And for the first time, I didn't cry afterward. Because when you finally speak the truth, you don't grieve the people who can't stand to hear it. The next day, Marianne called again. Claire, there's something you should know. Caleb's under review at work now. One of his co-workers made a report after seeing bruises on Tyler last year, but HR swept it under the rug. My heart dropped. Is he still seeing Tyler? Yes. And that's when I knew. I couldn't wait for someone else to act. I had to take this all the way. There's a kind of fury that doesn't burn. It freezes. That's what I felt as I stood in the middle of my living room the night Marianne told me Caleb was still seeing Tyler. Not the shaking, sobbing kind of anger. Not the chaos. No, this was different. This was the kind of anger that sharpens into clarity, that flattens every excuse, that whispers, enough. I stared at Emma, asleep on the couch again, her cast carefully cradled on a pillow, her favorite blanket twisted around her like a shield. I watched her chest rise and fall, and I remembered what she'd asked me the night before. What if they don't believe me, Mom? I didn't have an answer then, but I had one now. We'd show them. I pulled out a plastic storage bin from my closet, one I hadn't opened in years. Inside were scraps of my past, old photos, childhood drawings, a journal with tear-blotted pages, a copy of a poem I wrote at 17 that my English teacher had called haunting. Buried at the bottom was what I'd been looking for, an envelope marked private, sealed with yellowing tape. Inside were photographs of me, bruises on my upper arm from the summer I fell off the porch, a welt across my back from the time I got scratched on the tree out front. I had taken the pictures myself in the mirror with a disposable camera, not knowing why, only knowing I had to. And now, 25 years later, they mattered. Because this wasn't just about Emma. It was about all the girls who'd been told to lower their voice, fix their face, and don't make trouble. The next morning, I returned to Marianne's office with the photos, my handwritten journal pages, and a voice that no longer shook. I want to file a petition, I said. She raised an eyebrow. For what? For temporary guardianship of Tyler. Marianne leaned back. You understand what that means, Claire? It won't just be about Emma anymore. You'll be challenging your entire family, accusing your brother of abuse, and removing his child from his home. I'm not accusing anyone, I replied. I'm telling the truth. She studied me carefully, then nodded. We'll start the paperwork. That night, I sat across from Emma at the dinner table. She poked at her mashed potatoes, her appetite still small. Her cast rested gently on the table's edge. You okay, baby? I asked. She nodded, but didn't look up. I waited a few seconds, then said softly, I'm trying to get Tyler out of that house. He doesn't feel safe there either. That made her look up. But what if Grandpa and Grandma get mad again? They probably will. She blinked. Are you scared? I thought about it, about how for most of my life, fear had been the wallpaper in every room. But now? No, I said. Not anymore. She smiled, just barely, and kept eating. 2 days later, Caleb showed up at my door. He didn't knock. He banged. I opened it because I wasn't hiding anymore. He stood there, jaw tight, arms crossed, wearing that same cologne he'd always used to mask the stink of beer. "You think you're going to take my kid away?" he hissed. "I think someone needs to protect him. I didn't hurt her, Claire. She tripped. You know that." "No," I said, holding his gaze. "I don't." He laughed once, a sharp, humorless sound. "Mom and Dad told me what you're doing. You're sick. You've always been jealous. You were the failure, the one who stayed, the one who never made anything of herself." I didn't flinch. "You're right," I said. "I did stay. And now I'm the one who's cleaning up the mess you left behind." His mouth twisted into something cruel. "You're going to regret this." "No," I said, stepping forward. "You are." Then I shut the door in his face. I thought that would be the end of it for the night. But around 11:30, I saw headlights outside. I peeked through the curtains. My mother's car. I didn't move. A minute later, a soft knock. I opened the door just a crack. She stood there in her robe, face pale, eyes wide. "I begged him not to come here like that," she whispered. "Then maybe you should start begging him to change," I replied. She didn't speak, so I did. "You know what he did. You always have. And every time you smoothed it over, you made it worse." "Claire, honey." "No," I snapped. "I'm not your honey right now. I'm a mother, and I'm not letting another child get crushed under your silence." She opened her mouth again, but I closed the door before she could finish. This time, I didn't even feel guilty. The court date came faster than I thought. The hearing was private, family court. Just me, my attorney, a representative from Child Protective Services, and Caleb with his lawyer. Tyler wasn't there, but his testimony had been recorded and the evidence submitted. I sat in a stiff wooden chair, knees pressed together, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. But when I looked up and saw the judge, a woman in her 60s with steely gray eyes, something inside me steadied. I told her everything. About Emma, about the cast, about the bruises, about the boy with long sleeves. I gave her the photos from my childhood, my journal entries, my voicemail from my mother. And when I was done, I didn't look at Caleb. I looked at the judge, and I saw something rare in her eyes. Belief. Outside the courtroom, my attorney turned to me and said, "You did more than most would have dared." I didn't smile, because it wasn't over yet, but I could feel the air shifting, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the girl swallowing pain in the dark. I was the woman dragging it into the light. The morning after the hearing, I woke to sunlight streaming through the kitchen window like nothing had happened. Birds chirped. The world turned. Cars passed by on their way to work. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was standing. It had taken one broken bone to snap me out of decades of quiet. But the silence around me, that hadn't gone down so easily. Emma ate her cereal quietly, her good hand clumsily guiding the spoon. I was pouring my coffee when she looked up and said, "Will Uncle Caleb get in trouble now?" I sat down beside her. "That's up to the court," I said honestly. "But we did our part. We told the truth." She blinked slowly. "Did you ever tell the truth when you were little?" I froze. My breath caught in my throat as memories rose. Memories of my father's belt, of the screaming fights behind closed doors, of my mother crying but never stopping him. "No," I whispered. "I didn't." "Why not?" "Because no one believed me. Because I didn't have a Claire. Because I was alone." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Because I didn't know I could." Emma didn't say anything. She just reached out her little hand and laid it over mine, as if to say, "But I can now. And it's because of you." Later that afternoon, I heard a knock on the door. Not loud, not violent, but measured, careful. I opened it to find Tyler standing there with a duffel bag over one shoulder. "Dad said he's going on a trip," he mumbled. "Didn't say where. Told me to stay with Grandpa and Grandma." My stomach turned. "Do they know you're here?" He shook his head. "Can I stay here instead?" I stepped aside and let him in without hesitation. He dropped his bag on the floor and kicked off his sneakers. Emma ran from her room the moment she saw him and hugged him gently, avoiding the bruises they both knew too well. They didn't need to say anything. Survivors recognize each other. That night, I sat across from Tyler at the dinner table. Emma was in the living room watching cartoons, her laughter echoing faintly through the hallway. He was picking at a piece of cornbread, his head down. "I didn't mean to get him in trouble," he said quietly. I sighed. "I know." He said, "If I told anyone, we'd both end up in foster care." My jaw clenched. "That's not true, and you're not going anywhere." He looked up then, his eyes wet but defiant. "Why are you helping me? You don't have to." I reached across the table, took his hand. "Because someone should have helped me, and no one did." The next week was a blur of paperwork, interviews, and lawyer phone calls. The family court system is slow, glacial sometimes. But with Marianne's help and the growing mountain of evidence, the process moved faster than usual. But nothing could prepare me for what came next. Sunday afternoon, I stopped by the grocery store. I hadn't been out in days, too scared of bumping into someone from church or worse, from my family. But we were out of milk and cereal, and Tyler had a sudden craving for peanut butter cups. So I went, and that's where I saw her. My mother. In the frozen food aisle, arms full of TV dinners, face drawn tight with worry. She turned and saw me, and the look she gave me was one I'd never seen before. Not anger, not disappointment, fear. She stepped closer. "Claire, can we talk?" she asked in a hush. I didn't answer. She reached out and lightly touched my arm. "Please, it's not what you think." I looked her straight in the eyes. "No, it's exactly what I think." She blinked, stunned by the sharpness in my voice. "I did everything I could for you kids," she said, her voice cracking. "I tried." I stared at her, the cold air biting at my skin. "You tried to keep the family looking whole. That's not the same as keeping us safe." She stood there, speechless, while I walked away. For once, I got the last word. That night, I received a call from Marianne. "Claire," she said, her voice urgent. "I just got word. Caleb has fled the state. His car was spotted near the border in Missouri. He hasn't shown up for work. We're putting in a formal alert with CPS and family court to bar him from taking Tyler across state lines." My blood turned to ice. "He tried to run with him?" "We don't know for sure," she said, "but the court's taking this seriously. The judge already approved temporary protective custody. Tyler stays with you for now." I nearly collapsed. Relief, rage, exhaustion. They all fought for space in my chest. He tried to run because he knew. He knew the house of lies he built was falling apart, and for once, the people he thought were beneath him were looking him in the eye. The next day, Tyler sat on the porch steps beside me. He hadn't said much since the call. "Do you think he'll come back?" he asked. I exhaled. "Maybe, but if he does, we'll be ready." He turned to me, his voice barely a whisper. "Will I have to see him again?" I looked him straight in the eyes. "Not if I have anything to do with it." He nodded, and then he leaned his head on my shoulder, and for a moment the world felt still, not healed, but healing. 3 weeks later, the final custody hearing was set. Tyler's school counselor wrote a formal statement about the bruises and sudden absences. Emma's medical file was submitted again, And to my shock, a new name appeared on the witness list. A woman named Melissa, Caleb's ex-girlfriend. She had come forward voluntarily, said she once lived with him, said she had stories to tell, said she had scars. The moment I read her name on the document, I knew this wasn't just a family fight anymore. This was a pattern finally breaking. On the eve of the hearing, I stood by Emma's bed while she slept. Her cast had come off the week before. She was healing, stronger every day. She still asked questions, still needed reassurance, but the light in her eyes was returning. I whispered over her, "You're safe, you're loved, you're believed." And then I walked to the living room where Tyler had fallen asleep reading a comic book. I draped a blanket over his shoulders, and I whispered the same words. "You're safe, you're loved, you're believed." And I said it again in my mind, to the girl I used to be. I thought I'd feel stronger walking into that courtroom again. I'd imagined I'd be armored by everything we'd survived. The police reports, the photos, the statements, the trembling of Tyler's voice as he chose honesty over fear. I thought the truth would wrap around me like a shield, but as I stepped through the courthouse doors, all I could feel was that same weight I'd carried for years, the fear that no matter how loud I screamed, no one would hear me. Not because I didn't speak clearly, but because they didn't want to listen. It wasn't a big courtroom. Family court rarely is. Just rows of hard-backed benches, a pale wooden podium, the judge seated beneath a seal that read, "In God We Trust." Caleb sat at the far end of the room, flanked by his lawyer. He looked clean-shaven, sharp in a gray suit he never would have worn back home. To the untrained eye, he looked like a man wrongly accused. Calm, collected, misunderstood. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. He had already decided I was the enemy the moment I chose Emma over the family image, the moment I decided to stop covering for him. But I didn't come here to play his game. I came here to end it. The first to speak was Mary Ann. She read through the files. Emma's medical report, the photos, Tyler's own words, documented in her interviews. She spoke in a steady, clear voice, never emotional, never accusatory, just facts. Then came Emma's doctor, testifying via video. He explained the break, how it couldn't have come from just falling, how the angle of the fracture suggested a push with force. Caleb's attorney tried to poke holes. "Isn't it true that children often fall? That accidents happen?" "Yes," the doctor said, calm as water. "But when a child says she was pushed, and the injury matches that story, we don't call that an accident." I sat still, hands clenched in my lap. Across the aisle, my parents sat behind Caleb. My mother wore a navy dress, her lips drawn in a tight line. My father looked straight ahead, like he was pretending not to know any of us. Neither of them glanced at me, because to do that would be to see me, and they couldn't bear that. Not now. Not when the truth was flooding every corner of this room they once thought they owned. Then came the name that made Caleb shift in his chair. Melissa Graves. She walked into the courtroom in a black blouse and jeans, hair pulled back, makeup minimal. She looked tired, but not weak. When she took the stand, the judge leaned forward. "Please state your relationship to the defendant." "I dated Caleb Whitmore for just under a year," she said. "We lived together for 6 months." "And during that time," the attorney asked, "did he ever display violent or abusive behavior toward you?" "Yes." The room went quiet. She continued. "He would get angry over small things, accuse me of lying. He once threw a coffee mug across the kitchen. It missed me by inches. Another time, he punched a hole in the wall. The last night we were together, he grabbed me by the wrist so hard it bruised for days." "Did you ever report this?" "No," she said, because I didn't think anyone would believe me. He's charming. He knows how to lie. Then she looked directly at the judge. But when I heard he hurt his niece, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Caleb's lawyer objected. Your Honor, this is hearsay, irrelevant to the current custody case. But the judge raised a hand. Overruled. It speaks to the defendant's history of violence. Melissa stepped down without looking at Caleb, and in that moment, I saw him flinch. Not from shame, from exposure, because no one had ever stood up to him in public before. Then it was my turn. I stood at the podium, heart hammering. The microphone felt too close, my throat too dry. But when I looked up at the judge, a woman with tired eyes but unwavering attention, I took a deep breath. My daughter told the truth, I began. And for once in my life, so did I. I spoke slowly, clearly, about the years I spent silent, about the bruises I'd hidden, about the way this family had protected a boy while teaching a girl to bite her tongue. I told them about the night Emma screamed, about how my mother begged me to let it go, about how Tyler showed up at my doorstep with nothing but a duffel bag and years of fear tucked behind his eyes. I ended with this. If I have to be the villain in their story to protect my child, so be it. I'll carry that. But I won't carry silence anymore. The judge nodded, scribbled something down, then turned to Caleb. Mr. Whitmore, would you like to make a statement? He stood slowly, adjusted his tie. I'm not perfect, he began. I've made mistakes, but I've never intentionally hurt my niece. And as for my son, he's going through a phase. He's emotional. He's been manipulated. He looked directly at me then, for the first time that day. I think my sister has a vendetta. I think she always resented me, and now she's turning my own son against me. He sat back down, calm, measured, convincing, for anyone who hadn't lived with him. The judge called for a recess. I walked out into the hallway, legs trembling. Emma and Tyler waited on a bench nearby. I sat between them, wrapped one arm around each. No matter what happens, I whispered, we told the truth. They nodded, but I could see the fear still lingered. Because when you grow up not being believed, you never really expect justice. 30 minutes later, the judge returned. Her voice was steady. This court has reviewed all evidence, testimonies, and witness accounts. Based on the pattern of behavior, risk of harm, and ongoing investigation by Child Protective Services, I am granting temporary full guardianship of Tyler Whitmore to Ms. Claire Whitmore. Caleb stood. What? You can't. Sit down, Mr. Whitmore, the judge snapped. She continued. This court also issues a restraining order barring contact between Mr. Whitmore and both minor children until further notice. And just like that, it was done. Not over, but done. Outside, the sun was blinding. Tyler stepped into the light and exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for 10 years. Emma took his hand, and for the first time, they walked side by side like kids should, not afraid, not hiding, free. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly above me, each rotation slicing the silence into quarters. Emma was curled beside me, still too shaken to sleep alone. Tyler was down the hall in the spare bedroom, the door cracked open just enough to let the hallway light pour in, his only request. He'd never asked for toys, never asked for games or trips to the movies, just a door not completely closed. That request haunted me more than any bruise ever could. The victory in court should have felt like an exhale, but instead, it felt like I'd stepped into another kind of storm. One not filled with noise or shouting, but with a deeper kind of reckoning. Because what happens after you win? After the gavel strikes and the truth is finally heard? What do you do when the echoes of all the years they didn't believe you still ring louder than the moment they finally did? Around midnight, I got up and checked my phone. 26 unread messages, mostly from numbers I didn't save anymore. My aunt, my cousin, old family friends. "Claire, what are you doing to your family? This isn't the way to handle things. Why would you turn your own brother in? Don't you think you've done enough damage?" Not one of them asked if Emma was okay. Not one of them mentioned Tyler by name. But one message stood out. It was from my mother. A voice memo. I almost didn't open it, but my thumb hovered and clicked. Her voice came through, slow and trembling. "I hope you're happy. Your father hasn't spoken a word since the ruling. He sits in his chair staring out the window like a stranger. Caleb's gone. We don't know where he is. We're getting calls from everyone. You humiliated this family, Claire." She paused. "But maybe you're used to that by now. You were always the one who needed more attention. Always the one who made a scene when you didn't get what you wanted." Another pause. A longer one. "I raised you better than this, but maybe you were never meant to belong." Click. The message ended. I stared at the screen. Then I put the phone down. I didn't cry. I just felt empty. I walked into the kitchen and poured a glass of water, and I thought about what she said. "Maybe you were never meant to belong." It echoed. Because somewhere deep inside, that little girl who used to hide under the stairs during arguments still wondered if maybe she was the problem. If maybe the reason they always looked past her was because she wasn't enough, wasn't soft enough, quiet enough, grateful enough. But then I remembered something. Emma's scream, Tyler's bruises, my own reflection in the mirror when I was 13, staring at a welt I couldn't explain. And I realized something even deeper than anger, something colder than rage. I never belonged, because they never made room for truth. The next morning, I told Emma and Tyler we were taking the day off. No school, no court, no calls. We packed a picnic and drove to the lake just outside town, a place I hadn't been in years. The kids ran ahead, chasing dragonflies and skipping rocks. I laid out the blanket, took off my shoes, and let the grass tickle my ankles. For a moment, the world was just quiet. Not the kind of silence that hides screams, but the kind that heals. Tyler sat beside me eventually, holding a smooth stone. "Do you think it'll ever go back to normal?" he asked. I looked at him. "No," I said honestly. "But maybe we'll find something better." He nodded slowly. "I don't miss it," he whispered. "Miss what?" "The old house, the rules, the yelling." I didn't respond. Because what do you say to a boy who feels guilty for not missing the place that hurt him? You don't correct him. You just hold the truth with him. So I did. Later that evening, we stopped at the local diner for milkshakes. Emma got chocolate. Tyler ordered vanilla with caramel drizzle. I hadn't seen them smile this wide in weeks. As we waited for our food, an older woman approached our booth, a woman I vaguely recognized from church. She wore pearl earrings, a thick coat of perfume, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Claire," she said sweetly, "I heard about everything. What a brave thing you did." I knew what was coming. I just nodded. "But don't you think family should stick together? Some things are better kept private, you know." There it was, the old code, the old poison wrapped in politeness. I looked her straight in the face. "I used to believe that," I said. "But then I remembered that monsters don't live under beds. They live in dining rooms, and they eat dinner with you, and they know your middle name." She blinked, startled, then walked away. Tyler looked at me in awe. Emma whispered, "That was so cool, Mom." I just took a sip of my milkshake and smiled. That night, I opened my phone again. The voice memo from my mother was still there. I held my finger over the play button, then tapped delete. I didn't need to keep it anymore. I already knew what it said, and I knew it didn't define me, not anymore. But just as I set my phone down, a new message popped up. From Caleb. No name, just the number. One sentence. You think this is over? No punctuation, no signature, no apology, just a warning. A reminder that even when the court speaks, abusers don't disappear. They seethe, they wait, they watch. And maybe he was right. Maybe it wasn't over. But it was no longer his story. It was mine. And I had just begun telling it. I didn't respond to Caleb's message. I didn't reply, didn't show it to anyone, didn't save it. But I remembered every letter, not because I was afraid, but because I knew exactly what it meant. He was spiraling, losing control. And men like Caleb, who thrived in shadows, who used charm like a blade and silence like a shield, they didn't go quietly. They imploded. The next morning, Mary Ann called. "There's been a development," she said. "Are you sitting down?" I braced myself. A woman just came forward from Missouri. She's Caleb's ex-colleague. Apparently he stayed at her place last weekend after he fled town. My heart dropped. He took Tyler? No, she assured me. This was after the custody hearing, but she filed a report. I waited. She claims he tried to force his way back into her house after she told him to leave. She had to call the police. There's now an active warrant out for him. Aggravated harassment and trespassing. I nearly dropped the phone. "And the court has been notified," she added. "We'll be petitioning to make your temporary guardianship permanent." That night, I sat at the kitchen table with Emma and Tyler as they worked on a puzzle. Emma sorted the edge pieces. Tyler looked for corners. The light from the overhead lamp cast a soft halo across their bent heads. They didn't know what was happening yet. Didn't know that the man who haunted them had finally made a mistake too big for anyone to ignore. I watched them, and for the first time in months, I felt peace. Not total, but real. Because justice was no longer just possible. It was inevitable. The next day, the sheriff came to my door. He wore a gray jacket and held a thin folder. "Ms. Whitmore?" he asked. "Yes. I was asked to deliver this to you directly. Judge Adams has signed off." I opened the folder and scanned the document inside. Permanent guardianship. It was real. Signed, stamped, sealed. I blinked at the paper, then smiled, because this wasn't just legal recognition. This was validation, that I hadn't imagined it, that I wasn't being dramatic or emotional or overreacting. I had been right, all along. I didn't tell the kids right away. Instead, I drove us to the old farm road near Oak Hill, the one my dad used to take us down when we were little, back when things were simpler, or maybe just hidden better. We parked the car and walked into the tall grass, the afternoon sun turning gold behind us. "Why are we here?" Tyler asked. I pulled the papers from my bag, "Because I want you both to hear this, where there's room to breathe." They stood in front of me, curious, a little confused. I unfolded the document. "As of today," I said, "Tyler is officially in my care, permanently. No more court hearings, no more limbo." Tyler stared at me, eyes wide. "I'm not going back?" I shook my head. "You never were." He didn't cry. He just whispered, "Thank you." Then Emma, always the brave one, asked, "Does that mean we're a family now?" I crouched down, pulled them both into my arms. "We already were." Word spread fast. The next Sunday, I took Emma and Tyler to church. A new one, not the old one where the pews held whispers and fake smiles. This one was smaller, warmer. Nobody asked invasive questions. No one pulled me aside in the hallway. We sat in the second row and listened to a sermon about redemption, about how healing sometimes looks like walking away from people who won't say sorry. I squeezed both their hands during that part, because if God had anything to say about this story, I think he'd say this: you can forgive people, but you don't owe them your silence. After the service, I checked my phone. One missed call from an unknown number, then a text. I'm turning myself in. Caleb. I stared at the screen. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a statement. Cold, controlled, like he was still writing his own narrative. But this wasn't his narrative anymore. It never was. A week later, Marianne invited me to speak at a local panel for parents dealing with custody and abuse situations, survivors, advocates, people still clawing their way through the same darkness I'd just walked out of. I stood in front of 30 people, holding a microphone in both hands. I was told I was too emotional, I began, too loud, too much, that I was going to tear the family apart. I paused. And they were right. A ripple of surprise in the crowd. I did tear it apart because it was built on silence and secrets and fear. I looked out into those weary, brave eyes, and sometimes the only way to save something is to let it collapse. The applause afterward wasn't thunderous. It was quiet, respectful, raw. But it filled me more than any courtroom victory had, because I wasn't just fighting for Emma anymore, or for Tyler. I was fighting for every woman who had been told to shut up and smile, for every kid who was told to respect the uncle who hurt them, for every version of myself I used to be. That night, as we sat around the dinner table eating spaghetti, Emma looked up and said, "Mom, you're kind of like a superhero." Tyler grinned, the quiet kind. I laughed. "Maybe, but I don't wear a cape." Emma raised her fork like a sword. "That's okay. You've got fire." I looked at them, these two souls that fate had placed in my care, and I realized something. They didn't need me to be perfect, just honest, just safe, just there. Later, I opened my phone one more time. Caleb's message still sat there unread. I hovered over it, then tapped delete, not out of fear, but because I didn't need to read it to know how it ended. This story? It was no longer about him. It was about breaking the silence before it broke someone else. And this time, it didn't win. You'd think that after a storm like that, a courtroom battle, a public breakdown of lies, a family name dragged through the mud, the aftermath would roar. But it didn't. It whispered. It moved in sideways glances at the grocery store, in the careful wording of texts from former friends who just wanted to understand both sides, in the way people looked at me like I was both hero and pariah, a woman to admire from afar, but maybe not stand beside. There are no victory parades for women who speak out against their own blood. There is only the silence that follows noise. I took Emma and Tyler to the community fair 2 weeks after the custody ruling. It was something simple, something ordinary. Rides, cotton candy, bad country music, and cheap stuffed animals. But to us, it was a sign of life, a return to something resembling normal. Emma painted her face like a butterfly. Tyler won a stuffed bear at the ring toss booth. We took pictures. We laughed. We stood in line for funnel cake and lemonade. But even there, surrounded by the smell of fried dough and the sound of carnival bells, the tension found me. It wore the face of Mrs. Lane, my old Sunday school teacher. She walked over with a smile that made my stomach twist. She was holding a paper plate with a funnel cake, powdered sugar spilling over the edge like snowfall. "Claire," she said sweetly, "it's been too long. I haven't seen you at church." "I've been busy," I replied flatly, adjusting the stroller where Emma had just fallen asleep. She nodded. "Well, I just wanted to say, what you did was very brave." that pause, that deliberate hesitation before the word brave. And I hope you'll find it in your heart to forgive your family one day. They're hurting too, you know. There it was, wrapped in concern, laced with judgment. The old script. I looked her straight in the eyes. They were hurting while I was being hurt, and they still chose to protect the wrong person. Her smile faltered. Well, we're praying for you. Then she walked away, and I let her. That night, I found a note in my mailbox, no return address, folded in half. Inside was a single sentence, written in a shaky, unfamiliar hand. I wish someone had done what you did when it was me. No name, no signature. But I knew. There were more of us. Women, girls, silenced daughters, overlooked nieces, quiet wives. The ones who were told to smile at Thanksgiving dinner while sitting beside the man who broke them. They had stories too, and somehow mine had given them permission to remember. A week later, I received a letter in the mail with the official seal of the court. It was from Judge Adams, typed, formal. But it ended with a line that took my breath away. Ms. Whitmore, your voice helped this court see clearly. Your strength has created safety where there was none. We don't often get to say this, but thank you for being the beginning of someone else's peace. I read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and placed it in a small box on my nightstand. Not to keep as proof, but as a reminder. Sometimes peace doesn't come to find you. You have to fight for it. The following Saturday, I got a knock on my door just after noon. When I opened it, I froze. It was my father, dressed in his usual flannel shirt, worn jeans, and boots. His eyes were dull, face sunken in a way I didn't remember. He looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but something in him had shrunk. "Claire," he said. I stepped out, closed the door gently behind me. "I don't want Emma or Tyler seeing you." He nodded. "Can we talk?" I crossed my arms. "That depends. Are you here to apologize or to defend Caleb?" He didn't answer right away, then said quietly, "I think, for the first time in my life, I don't know what to say." "That's not good enough." "I know." Silence. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a photo, one I hadn't seen in years. It was me at age 9, holding a trophy from a spelling bee, my front tooth missing, beaming. "I found this last week," he said. "It reminded me of who you used to be." I stared at the photo. "I didn't change," I whispered. "You just finally saw me." He looked down. "I'm sorry." There it was, soft, barely audible, but real. I didn't cry. I just nodded. "I'm not ready to forgive you," I said. "I wouldn't expect you to," he replied. Then he turned and walked away. I stood on the porch long after he was gone, not because I was shaken, but because I had waited 39 years to hear those 2 words. And while they didn't fix anything, they cracked something open, a window, a beginning. That night, I didn't check my phone. I didn't scroll through the old messages. I didn't reread the judge's letter. I sat with Emma and Tyler on the couch, a blanket over our laps, a movie playing in the background that none of us were really watching. And I thought, this is the after. Not perfect, not peaceful, always, but honest. And that, after a lifetime of pretending, was enough. It started with a birthday card. A soft pink envelope slipped through the mail slot the week Emma turned 11. There was no return address, no handwriting I recognized at first. Just a store-bought card with glittered balloons and a dancing unicorn. Inside, a folded $20 bill, and one sentence written in faint cursive, "Grandma still loves you." Emma brought it to me that afternoon, holding it like something radioactive. "Should I keep it?" she asked. I looked down at the card, a hollow gesture soaked in guilt and glitter. "No, honey," I said gently. "You're worth more than hush money." She nodded, tore the card in half, and threw it in the trash without another word. But I didn't. I kept the pieces, because that card was never really for Emma. It was for me. A test, a nudge, a plea dressed as kindness. And I wanted to remember what not falling for it looked like. After the card came the emails, first from my cousin Angela, the same one who didn't speak to me for over a year, who once said in a group text that I'd burned bridges and expected people to swim to me. Her message now: "I've been thinking a lot about everything. Maybe we didn't support you enough. Maybe we didn't want to see what you were trying to say. I'd like to reconnect, for the kids' sake." For the kids' sake. It always came back to that. Not because they cared about the kids, but because children forgive faster. Because children don't ask for full apologies. They just crave comfort, familiarity. They wanted back in, but without the consequences. Then came the friend requests on social media. My old hairdresser, my second cousin in Nashville, my dad's fishing buddy's wife, the one who told me I was being dramatic the night Caleb shoved Emma. All of them, now sending little waves, little likes, little olive branches. No one said, "I'm sorry." No one said, "I was wrong." And they just drifted in like nothing had happened, like my silence had expired, like the dust had settled and the door was open again. But it wasn't. Because forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. And peace doesn't mean pretending. Marianne called one afternoon in the middle of it all, just to check in. Her voice was steady, as always, but I could tell she was relieved. "Most people don't follow through," she said. "They file, they fight, they win, and then they go back to the family, back to the excuses. It's hard to live without the web you grew up in, even if it's made of barbed wire." "I'm not going back," I said. "I know," she said. And in that silence between us, I felt something sacred. Not victory, but resolve. Tyler had begun to thrive. He started drawing again, comics mostly, about a boy with invincible arms and laser eyes who saved his sister from villains that looked suspiciously like men in suits. When I asked if the boy was him, he said, "Kinda, but cooler." Emma made a fort in the living room and declared it her no-anxiety zone. She filled it with pillows, battery-powered candles, and a journal where she wrote letters to a future version of herself. One night, I peeked inside and read, "Dear future Emma, I hope you're still brave. I hope you still tell the truth, even if your voice shakes. I hope you know Mom didn't save you. She taught you to save yourself." I cried for an hour after that. Not out of grief, but out of honor, because my daughter wasn't broken. She was becoming whole, right in front of me. But then came the message that nearly made me falter, from Caleb's lawyer, not through the court, not official, just an email forwarded by my own attorney with the subject line, "Possible mediation option." Inside, a proposal. Caleb was seeking a supervised visitation agreement, 1 weekend a month in a neutral space with court-approved supervision. He wanted to rebuild the bond with his son. My hands shook as I read it, not because I was afraid of him coming back, but because I knew why he was doing this. Not for Tyler, not for healing, but for image, control, optics. Because if he could check the box that said attempting reconciliation, maybe he could clean up what remained of his reputation. Maybe he could tell the world, "Look, I tried. She just wouldn't let me." I sat Tyler down that evening just before dinner. "Hey, buddy, I need to tell you something. Your dad is asking the court if he can see you again." He stared at his plate, quiet. "Supervised, just once a month. Nothing's decided yet. But I want to know how you feel about it." He was quiet for a long time. Then he looked up and asked, "Do I have to?" "No," I said immediately. His shoulders sagged with relief. I don't want to, he whispered. Not even with someone watching. Not yet. Okay, I said, then we fight it. And we did. My attorney filed the objection within 24 hours. We included updated counseling notes from Tyler's therapist, detailing his trauma responses and the severe anxiety the request had triggered. We included copies of his drawings, with his permission. We included everything we needed to say, he's not ready, he may never be, and that is okay. The court denied Caleb's request. The judge's ruling was brief, final, and surprisingly firm. Given the sustained pattern of behavior, lack of demonstrated rehabilitation, and the minor child's expressed discomfort, the court finds supervised visitation is not in the child's best interest at this time. I printed the ruling and framed it, not out of spite, but because it was proof that when a child says no, someone finally listens. Emma watched me hang it on the wall one morning, just above the kitchen table. Why are we putting that there? Because, I said, we decorate with what saved us. She smiled and poured the cereal, like it was just another Tuesday. Because for us, it was, and that was the biggest miracle of all. Some houses don't fall with fire. Some crumble slowly, one denial at a time, one blind eye, one tightened jaw, one whispered excuse over Sunday dinner, until all that's left is a frame, a place where love once claimed to live but no longer does. My childhood home didn't burn down, but I stopped returning to it, and that, in its own way, was a demolition. It took months for the neighborhood to stop whispering, for people to stop squinting when they passed me at the market, for the tension in the air to break like a fever, for the town to find someone else to whisper about. Eventually they did, but I hadn't forgotten, and I hadn't forgiven. I had simply moved on, and for someone like me, that was the most radical act of all. Emma made the honor roll that spring. She stood on stage in her denim dress and glitter shoes, clutching her certificate like a golden ticket. I took pictures, cheered like a fool, cried like I hadn't just spent the last year in courtrooms and therapy waiting rooms. Tyler joined the middle school's art club. His sketches became sharper, more colorful. The boy in his comic now wore a cape, still faceless, but flying. And I started writing again. In the quiet hours after they went to bed, I sat by the window with a mug of tea and poured pieces of myself into blank pages. Not about Caleb, not about court, but about the woman I had to become, and the girl I had to mourn to become her. One evening in late April, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. Claire Whitmore? Yes. This is Officer Jared McCaskill with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. I wanted to inform you that Caleb Whitmore has entered a plea deal. He'll be serving 12 months of probation, community service, and mandatory counseling. I exhaled slowly. Thank you for letting me know. He's also barred from initiating contact with you or either child for the duration of his probation. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. Appreciate the update. After I hung up, I didn't cheer, I didn't celebrate, but I did sleep, deeply, for the first time in almost a year. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. The return address, Caleb Whitmore. I stood at the mailbox, staring at the envelope for 10 full minutes. The kids were still at school. The afternoon sun was low, the breeze gentle. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, cold, no greeting, no apology, just a list of things he wanted returned. 1 leather jacket, black, box of old DVDs, framed photo of Dad's fishing trip, 2009 wristwatch, silver, broken clasp. At the bottom, 1 final line. If you can't return them, at least don't pretend they're yours. I laughed, out loud, because there it was, the real twist. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He wasn't asking for his son. He was asking for objects, things, like that's what he lost, like that's what mattered. I tossed the letter in the trash because I wasn't going to fight over memories he'd already poisoned. That night, I sat on the porch with Tyler. He watched the fireflies blink across the yard, his knees pulled up to his chest. "Do you think he misses me?" he asked. I paused. "I think he misses control. He misses being the one you feared." Tyler didn't reply, just nodded slowly. Then he whispered, "I don't miss him. I just miss the idea of a dad." I wrapped my arm around him and pulled him close. "I know, sweetheart, but you don't need an idea. You need real. And real doesn't hurt you, and call it love." That summer, I painted the hallway, the one where Emma had screamed, the one where the shadows used to live. Soft yellow, the color of sunflowers and lemon slices. It took 3 coats to cover the cracks, but by the end, it looked like a place where joy had always lived, even if it hadn't. One morning, Emma sat beside me on the porch swing and asked, "Do you think people like Uncle Caleb know they're hurting people?" I thought about that. Hard. "I think some do," I said, "and some don't care, and some have been hurting for so long they forget what love even looks like." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you think he'll ever change?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I do know this. It's not your job to fix him." She didn't reply, just held my hand a little tighter. Tyler's 12th birthday came and went. No call, no card, no surprise appearance, just the quiet joy of cake and laughter and friends. We sang, took pictures, lit sparklers in the backyard under the stars, and as he blew out the candles, I saw it in his eyes. Peace. The kind no court order could write into existence. The kind that only grows when you stop watering the weeds and start tending to what can bloom. At the end of the summer, I took down the last remaining photo of Caleb from the hallway. One from childhood, all 4 of us smiling at a lake, our teeth too big, our limbs sunburned, our parents young and lying through their smiles. I didn't tear it up, didn't burn it. I tucked it in a box, because it wasn't about erasing him. It was about choosing who deserved space in our home. Our house didn't burn, but the lies did, the silence did, the legacy of fear did. And what rose from the ashes wasn't a perfect family, but it was a real one. You don't always notice peace when it arrives. It doesn't slam open the front door or announce itself in flashing lights. It slips in quietly, like sunlight crawling across your floors in the morning, like the hush in the house after the kids fall asleep. One day, I realized we weren't surviving anymore. We were living. Tyler got a bike. He'd never had one of his own before, at least not one he'd picked out himself. His father always believed in practicality, which meant secondhand things with dents, rusted handlebars, flat tires, things that worked, just barely. But this time, he chose it himself, blue, with silver streaks, and a bell that he insisted on ringing even in the driveway. He rode it until sunset most nights, circling the cul-de-sac like he was orbiting a new planet he finally got to call home. One night, he came inside, cheeks flushed, and said, "I forgot what it feels like to not be scared all the time." I knelt in front of him, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "That's what freedom feels like." Emma's bedtime prayers changed too. She used to ask God to keep her safe from nightmares. Now she thanked him for dreams that felt like soft pillows, and for a home where nothing breaks but cookies. She started singing to herself while brushing her hair, drawing hearts on her notebooks again, leaving little sticky notes on the fridge that said, "You're the best mom," in crooked handwriting. I kept every one, because they were proof that healing doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's just the absence of fear. The seasons turned, leaves browned, then fell. Emma jumped into piles taller than she was. Tyler raked, mostly so he could undo it with one solid leap. We carved pumpkins, hung paper ghosts, let the house smell like cinnamon and clove. No tension in the air, no checking our phones, no wondering what storm might come next. That was the victory no one wrote about. The quiet days. Thanksgiving came around. It was the first time I didn't receive an invitation from my parents. Not even a call. And for once, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt free. We made our own dinner, just the three of us. I let the kids pick the menu. Emma wanted macaroni and cheese shaped like stars. Tyler asked for apple pie, like the kind in cartoons. We made everything from scratch. Burned the first pie. Laughed so hard we cried. Afterward, we sat around the table, full and warm. I looked at them and asked, "What are you thankful for?" Tyler was quiet for a second, then said, "That I can breathe now." Emma added, "That I can laugh without flinching." They turned to me. I wiped a tear. I'm thankful I didn't give up when it felt easier to stay quiet. And we toasted to that, with root beer and whipped cream and our hearts wide open. Around Christmas, the church we'd been attending held a candlelight service. We sat in the second row, the glow of 100 flames dancing against stained glass. The pastor spoke about Emmanuel, God with us, and I wept, because for the first time in years I felt it, not as a concept, not as theology, but as presence. God with us, in the courtroom, in the ER, on the front porch when I told my mother I was done protecting their pride, in Tyler's voice when he said he didn't miss the house he left behind, in Emma's grip when she clung to my arm like it was the only thing keeping her afloat. He was with us in every bruise we survived, in every lie we tore down, in every moment we dared to say, "This is not okay." After the service, a woman I'd never met before stopped me. "I wanted to thank you," she said softly. "My sister was in court the day you testified." She said it gave her courage. I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak, because that's what people don't tell you about doing the right thing. It's rarely loud. It's a ripple, a whisper, a doorway someone else needed to see open. That night we walked home through the snow, candles still in hand. Emma leaned against me, sleepy and warm. Tyler walked ahead, his scarf flapping in the wind, humming a Christmas song off-key. And I thought to myself, this is what we fought for. Not justice that makes headlines, not revenge, but this. A quiet night, a safe walk home, a family that wasn't perfect, but was real. I used to think closure meant hearing, "I'm sorry." That one day, the people who hurt me would show up on my doorstep, tears in their eyes, apologies in their hands. I imagined my mother standing there, voice breaking, finally saying, "I should have believed you." I imagined Caleb admitting everything in court, maybe even Emma watching it happen, seeing justice in real time. But that didn't happen. And now I realize I never needed it, because closure didn't come in the shape of their guilt. It came in the shape of our joy. Spring bloomed early that year. The dogwoods along the street unfurled soft pink petals. Daffodils popped up in unexpected places, tiny rebellions of beauty where there had once been only gray. Emma started sleeping through the night again. Tyler got accepted into a summer art camp he'd been too afraid to apply for last year. I opened the windows while making breakfast, letting the bird song and morning breeze drift through our little kitchen like music made just for us. The war was over, and the soil was ready for something new. One afternoon, as I was weeding the garden, Tyler walked out holding a letter. "Something came for you." I stood, brushing dirt from my hands. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, the kind they use for formal invitations. Inside was a handwritten note from my mother. It began with Claire. There was no dear, no I miss you, just her words, written in the same cursive she used on birthday cards when I was a child. I still don't understand everything you did, but I hope someday you'll see that we were only trying to protect the family. We made mistakes, but we still love you, and if you ever feel ready to come home, we'll be here. She'd underlined the word home. I folded the letter once, then twice. Then I slid it into the drawer beneath the coffee pot, between old coupons and mismatched Tupperware lids, because home is where the truth lives. And that house, that name, that silence, it wasn't mine anymore. Months passed. The nights grew warmer. Emma learned how to braid her own hair. Tyler started calling me Mom instead of Claire. I never asked him to. One night, as I tucked him in, he said, "I don't remember what it felt like to be scared." I smiled and said, "That's because you're safe now." And he replied, "I know. You made it safe." I turned off the light and walked into the hallway, letting the tears come as quietly as possible. Because some victories don't need an audience, just a witness. On the anniversary of the day Emma's arm was broken, I woke early, not out of dread, but because I wanted to take it back. Not the event, but the date. I made pancakes shaped like stars. We went to the zoo. Tyler brought his sketchbook and drew elephants while Emma made up names for the giraffes. We didn't mention the past. We didn't have to. We'd already rewritten it. With joy, with safety, with choice. Sometimes, in the quiet hours of the evening, I still think about what could have happened if I'd stayed silent, if I'd accepted their explanations, if I'd chosen family image over Emma's scream, if I'd let Caleb come over for Sunday dinner like nothing had happened. And I realize now, the world teaches women to measure themselves in restraint, in how well we endure, in how quietly we carry pain. But I am no longer quiet, and I no longer carry their shame. I let it rot behind them, where it belongs. The last time I saw Caleb was from a distance. It was outside the courthouse, 6 months after the final ruling. He was walking to his car, head down, alone. I didn't approach. He didn't see me. But in that moment, I felt nothing. Not rage, not fear, not triumph, just freedom. Because his story was no longer tied to mine. He could live in the ruins he built. We had moved on. That summer, I planted sunflowers along the fence. They grew tall, stubborn, radiant, reaching for the sky like they'd never once been afraid of storms. Emma helped water them every morning. Tyler painted them one afternoon, carefully capturing the way their heads tilted toward the sun. I hung that painting in the living room. It reminds me, every single day, what we build after the fire matters more than anything we lost inside it. I don't need to be remembered as brave, or strong, or righteous. I just want my children to remember that when the world told me to sit down, I stood. When the system gave me a door barely cracked, I pushed it open with both hands, and I let the light in. One night, Emma whispered as I tucked her in, "Do you think bad things will ever happen again?" I held her face in my hands and said, "Yes, probably." She looked worried, but I added, "But now we know what to do. We speak, we fight, we hold each other, and we keep going." She nodded, closed her eyes, and slept, peaceful, dreaming, safe. We never returned to the house where it all happened. We never sat around my parents' table again. But we built a new one, and around it, we laughed, we prayed, we told the truth. Not because it was easy, but because it was ours. And that was the life we built from the ruins, one brick of truth at a time. If this story stirred something deep inside you, if you've ever been told to stay silent, to protect the very ones who caused your pain, then you're not alone. You don't owe your silence to anyone. Not family, not tradition, not fear. You owe yourself the right to speak, to heal, to rebuild. And sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is walk away from what was never safe to begin with. If this story felt like yours, or reminded you of someone you love, don't let it pass by quietly. Leave a comment below and tell us, what part broke your heart? What part gave you hope? Click like if you believe the truth should never be buried, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because healing isn't just personal, it's contagious. And your voice? It matters more than you know.